Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Good morning once again. Is there anyone here for the first time today? Do you want to give us your name? Keith? Patrick?
My name is Bill.
Bill.
I was here before.
Welcome back. Ken, okay. Well, let's go around again and introduce, we'll each say our names, and if first-time people will repeat their names so we can get to know you, that would be good. My name is Paul.
Larry.
Douglas. Joe. Lee.
Ken.
Howard.
Jack.
Cliff. Paul. Kay. Peter.
Louis.
Rick. Logan. Richard.
Stephen.
Darren. Bear.
Nobu.
Joy. George. Todd.
Dean.
Everybody?
I'm Clint. Peter. Patrick. Tom. Bill. Wilhelm.
Buddha. Pam.
Joaquin. Ray. John. Jim.
Okay. Well, today we have two speakers from our sangha who will tell us how they basically got here. Dean Bellerby comes to us from New Zealand via Australia and Canada, and I had the pleasure of hearing some of his story as he drove me to Spirit Rock for a one-day retreat recently. And Todd Pope's been with us for over a year. He's a physician at Kaiser, and he's already doing some service for the sangha, maintaining our member database, and we're going to publish a directory, membership directory. He's volunteered to coordinate that also. But we all have different stories about how we got here. I mean, I know my parents didn't say, now when you grow up, I want you to join the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. So we all sort of got here through our own journeys, and Todd and Dean have volunteered to tell us about theirs. So Dean said you'd be speaking to us first.
Good morning. I was rather hoping the chill in the air and the Thanksgiving weekend would diminish the enthusiasm for sangha, but apparently not. Perhaps it was our wonderful teaser campaign, Todd, that we sent out. When I was asked to talk here, I thought to myself, but Dharma's for enlightenment. And I thought, well, I guess I can look at my story and put it together. And in doing so, I realized the wisdom that is in fact hidden in my story as much as everybody's story. My story in particular is not one of any great extremes, but it's one of those stories where at some point you think to yourself, I haven't had a bad life, but why don't I have a great life? And you realize the degree of unfulfillment that happens. For me, this happened 3 years ago, but I'll give you a little history first. I'm from a sheep farm in New Zealand, which is the East Island of Australia, for those of you who aren't sure. That way you can call me an Australian and I won't be offended. My parents' names were John and Barbara. My father had a cow, in fact, named Barbara, so when he got mad, he could go out and yell at the cow instead of at my mother. I had a pet lamb who was fairly realistically called Lamb Chop, because that's pretty much where he ended up in a few years. But my parents were very good at providing roots. They were good at financial security, at providing a degree of opportunity. But like perhaps so many parents of that generation, they didn't understand the concept of wings, particularly for a son who was gay, and they wouldn't know about that. The idea of creativity, of spirituality, of individuation, those were luxuries for their generation, and therefore not considered things that would be suitable for ours. It wasn't a way of providing stability and security and provision for your future. And the family that, of course, you were expected to have. And I think for me, my gayness became a signal difference for me from a fairly early age. So it clustered around some of those other individual differences that I had that I didn't know how to express to either myself or to them. And so I disappeared to myself and to others for 37 years until approximately 3 years ago. And when I say disappeared to myself, it pretty much was that, not a conscious disappearing, but a disappearing of your own reality, of living your own life and living the life that you expect and are expected to lead. And the Dalai Lama has a saying about life and suffering being dislocation. And I think that's a great term, because it's not necessarily a lot of pain, but the idea of something dislocated. If you've ever had a dislocated finger or something, you know it's not necessarily painful, it's just very strange. And the idea of not fitting in is pretty much how I spent a lot of my life, even though it wasn't a conscious understanding of that. And for me, I come back to a concept which I call grace. And I was brought up in a Christian upbringing, and in fact I had a period of religious fundamentalism, and there was the concept of grace coming down like a river. And as part of my returning to myself, I have co-opted that term back and used it this time in a way which suits my purposes and who I am more. And the idea of grace for me is two things. Grace being perhaps unmerited favour. The two things are the power of karma, and I think I understand the long lens of consciousness that is who I am, rather than this mortal body, this social structure, this world, this career that I inhabit. I was reading autobiography of a yogi recently, and there was a wonderful description of when the yogi died, and it was he closed his mortal eyes to the scenes of this transitory state of being, which I thought was beautiful because A, it implies a choice, and B, it implies a much greaterness than who you are as a player in this transitory state of being and the scenes that go by and you get so attached to or averse to. And the second thing that I would say, apart from the power of karma, for me in constituting grace, is the idea of an intelligent and responsive and benevolent greater consciousness in the universe that I am part of and that I connect into, that is partly within me and much more without of me. And a lot of my path now is coming to a point of realizing the non-duality of that, the non-division between myself, my own consciousness, and the greater consciousness that I think was fundamental in tapping me on the shoulder at 37 and saying it's time. A bit on the process itself. I came to America via way of Canada and Australia. I've been here about 6 years now. And in fact, I think coming to America was good in many ways. One way is to see the transparency of greed and perhaps duality that exists here. And I came in a corporate environment. I've worked in marketing and advertising. And advertising pretty much is right at the end of transparency of how business operates. Not all business, of course, but perhaps 90% of business. And that was a way for me of, I think, helping realize that my values were in fact changing, and that as they were expressed in my work, there was a lot of difficulty in having them fit together. And of course, that's a difficult thing to let go of, because unconsciously I'd identified myself so much with my work. So I had quite a few issues, and in fact, the day that I finished work last year in April, I really fell apart, and I had my first anxiety attack. I had some depression. I had a lot of ego dissolution in various ways. And I realized that they were gifts for me. And I think, Bob, you gave the poem, Rumi's poem, The Guest House, a couple of weeks ago, that really resonated with me when it talked about invite the guests in laughing and entertain them as they are showing you or giving you a message from beyond. And that was very helpful for me in finally realizing that. Well, it took a lot of therapy and time. And one of the things I found was that I had to change, at least initially, my work to more accurately make it fit with my values. So I went to work for a non-profit, which is pretty much the other end of the spectrum from advertising. And I worked for a company called Transfair that does fair trade certification. So for coffee, tea and fruit and rice and sugar, it ensures that farmers at origin, countries of origin, are paid a fair price, and that enables them to maintain a higher standard of living and keep children out of the fields and go to school, and just ensures generally a better way of life. And it's good for consumers too in America, in that it allows them more empowerment over where their dollars are going. And I thought that would save me. I assumed that saving the world was the primary thing of importance, having lived so unconsciously for so long. But I think I, in the end, ended up a bit like Clarice in Silence of the Lambs. And I can't believe I'm quoting that. But I remember when Hannibal Lecter was asking her and said, "Can you still hear the lambs screaming?" And that's, in a sense, what the point that I came to throughout the course of this year in my non-profit. And I realized that to help the world, and thereby to know the world and to love the world, it's of importance for me to know myself and to help myself and to save myself. And I thought, well, can I do that together? And I have realized that it's going to be difficult. I started by saving the world first and thought it fit in the saving myself around, and that hasn't proven possible. In fact, I have a little support from a French Buddhist monk called Mathieu Ricard. I was reading in here, and he recalled a time his mother announced she wanted to go to Bombay to serve the poor. 1 year of retreat, he told her, is giving much greater service to all sentient beings. He compared it to taking the time to build a hospital, which in the end will be more powerful than helping people one by one on the street. It makes sense to train to be a better person and to get rid of self-importance. Then you're able to be genuinely helpful to everyone with no strings attached. And I actually read that about a year ago, and I thought, well, I don't agree with that. I thought, that's a little self-centered. But I think I know what he means now. I think I understand that the transparency of self and the strength and the wisdom of self are as important. And for me, my path is now, in fact, to spend time developing those. I resigned from my non-profit a couple of weeks ago and will work there till early next year. I'm going to do a form of coaching called integral coaching. You may have heard of executive coaching or life coaching. This is a variation on that. There's a year-long course for that. And it helps to help your clients open up their structure interpretation. In other words, the way that they see the world. and to develop new competencies to help people get over the things that have always held them back. And I think I felt that for many years I did that fairly unconsciously. And I think that this will help me figure myself out more and will also help me do the thing which is important for me, which I tried this year in the non-profit and couldn't quite make work, which is to really express myself through my vocation and to gain wisdom and to help giving back through that expression. And of course all done with authenticity and transparency and love for myself and for the world. And for me, I guess 3 learnings that I'd like to share with you out of all of this. And the first one is that for me, meditation has really built a muscle of observation. And Ram Dass, in fact, says that he has become a connoisseur of his neuroses. And I think I understand what he means by that. And I find during the day when I'm not meditating, I don't necessarily change my actions, although sometimes I do in small ways into more positive actions, but I do find that I'm more able to notice where I am and what I'm doing and how I'm reacting. And that noticing gives me the choice, which I don't always take, but sometimes I do. And the second thing that I think I've thought about or learned, that transformation comes through simplification for me. A lot of the time I live in my head, and simplification, I guess I always thought of that as something a little inferior or something a little just not quite so smart, and complexity was where it's at. But I realized the simpler I can make my life and my mind, the more powerful my reality becomes for me. And I realized that the point of everything isn't necessarily in doing, or the point of things, all I have to do really is to be. And I think it was Pema Chodron or maybe Jack Confield, one of them said that enlightenment is about being without anxiety about non-perfection. Enlightenment is being without anxiety about non-perfection. And that's something that I find a useful concept. And the other idea is the Pali word for impermanence, which is anicca. And I went on a 10-day insight meditation Vipassana retreat and got to live for 10 days the concept of impermanence as stuff arose and passed away, emotions, physical sensations, thoughts, memories, future hopes. The idea of anicca, this idea of impermanence, helps me not grasp into things quite so tightly. And I guess the third point for me is that the path is, in fact, the point. And somebody said it's a long way from the head to the heart. And for those of us who do live in our heads a lot, that is perhaps, in many ways, our journey, or at least a good part of it. And, I realize that an enlightened end state isn't, although it's a nice concept to have in an objective and solution-oriented society, really the trial run that we have, this life, this way we are manifested, our consciousness is manifested in this time, in this space, in this body, that's what's important. And I would like to finish on a thought. It's a fairly famous quote from T.S. Eliot that many of you probably know, but the idea that we shall never cease from exploration. In the end, what our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time. So thank you for letting me share. There's something wonderful in humanity, I find, that people will sit around and listen so intently to someone's story.
Okay. Well, when I was asked to speak to the sangha, I kind of thought the same thing. I'm not an enlightened being any more than anybody else. But I have had some pretty interesting things happen to me, so I'm going to talk about that. So, I guess to put some sense of organization to it, I could say that before a couple of years ago, spiritual matters and things like that were of less importance, and now they're of more importance. And I kind of had a pretty typical life, I think. Grew up in San Diego, single parent family, but well taken care of, loved, had almost everything I wanted. Typical education, high school, college. I did go on to medical school and become a physician, and then moved to San Francisco to do most of my residency training. And I would say that before, a couple of years ago, my life was mostly about the things of the world. The boyfriend I was with for 4 years, and working, buying stuff, trying to find a house, going out, just everything, all the usual stuff. And then started to have some problems in my relationship, and my boyfriend and I went to a couples therapist. And it was sort of going through that the therapist would say things that were very Buddhist, and I didn't realize it at the time. But I would talk about something, he'd say, well, Todd, let's notice that. Let's just look at that, and how does it make you feel, and notice your feeling, and sit with it for a minute. And that's, in retrospect, of course, that's a very sort of Buddhist thing to say, but I didn't realize it at the time. But anyway, long story short, boyfriend and I broke up. I kept the therapist for me. And started having individual therapy. And then, on August 23rd of 2003, at the age of 33, I had a heart attack. Which was a very strange thing. I was sitting at home on a Friday night, on call, my beeper, sitting outside, and had just ordered out Indian food and had a huge dinner. And then right afterwards, as I was still living with the boyfriend at the time, was getting ready to go on a trip, I started having chest pain and pressure sensation, which I assumed, of course, at age 33 was indigestion from my dinner. And over the next few minutes, there were certain symptoms that started to appear that were right out of a textbook. And for me, it was quite an odd experience, because I'm sitting here going, okay, chest pressure, short of breath, nausea, the sensation's going down my arm, and now it's going up into my jaw, and it was sort of me recounting this thing, but knowing that it couldn't really be happening because I was too young. So anyway, I grabbed the boyfriend, and we walked to Davies ER, 2.5 blocks, and I said if I drop down on the ground, call 911, and he's thinking, yeah, you're just, you're anxious, you're freaking out. But anyway, I got to the ER, they did an EKG, and sure enough, it was a heart attack. And I got carted off by ambulance to California Pacific Medical Center, where they did an angiogram. And lo and behold, whatever had started the heart attack was gone. And over the next 6 months, I had every possible diagnostic test you could imagine in the medical community, and there was no cause ever found. But I spent a couple of days in the ICU, a couple of days in the hospital after that to recover from the heart attack, and luckily there's no permanent damage at this point. But for me, it was sort of I had this thing happen to me for no Western medical reason, and it really kind of shook up my world quite a bit. At the time, I was in a very, very stressful private practice, and sort of doing the business aspect of it, doing the medical aspect of it, on call, 1 week out of 9, and just crazy dukkha life that I was living. And it was after that happened, and I was working with the therapist more, that I kind of took a step back and started to look into, why did this happen? Is there some other reason why it happened? And that's when I started getting into Buddhism. I stumbled upon this book, which I cannot recommend highly enough for everyone in this room. It's called Buddhism, Plain and Simple by Steve Hagen, who's a monk in Minneapolis. And what it does is he basically goes through what the Buddha said, minus all the trappings of the last 2,500 years. It's basically, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, what did the Buddha say, and how he thinks that applies to our lives. It's a fantastic book. So, that's how I got here, and I found GBF online and came to this and had read I think Queer Dharma. I thought, yeah, that's the collection of stories. But having said that, where I am now is it's a really interesting place because Buddhism speaks to me on a very, very deep level. And since I've been studying it and meditating, I've come to realize that the seeds were always there for that. I was, I think, a very compassionate and sort of empathic child. I was the kid who, when all the bullies were making fun of the geek, I would hang out with the geek afterwards and talk to him and try to make him feel better, because I could feel that. I could feel the hate and how badly he must have felt, or she must have felt from that. And I think maybe it's part of that difference you feel from being gay, and know that you could be the next one to get picked on. But so that's important to me, and I think that my profession is no accident. I think by the time I started medical training, the writing was kind of on the wall, and you could see managed care starting to take over and make it perhaps not quite as profitable a career as it was, in the days of Marcus Well, MD. But it's something that I wanted to do, and I really do enjoy it. And right now I'm in this unique position, seeing patients in the general internal medical practice at Kaiser, to see that there is so much suffering that's caused by our attachment. And, I get to patch things up and make some things better, maybe alleviate some physical suffering, and maybe steer patients toward alleviating their psychological suffering. But the big one, the fact that we're all going to get old and die, is something I can't really touch as a physician. And it's just seeing people come in and fall apart a little bit week after week, and to see their spouses and loved ones and partners suffer, watching their partner fall apart, and or sudden death come and take someone in the prime of their life and just they're gone. It's really Buddhism's helped me reframe that a little bit and not look at it as sort of that I'm fighting this thing and trying to win, but that I'm there to help them along as much as I can. And maybe help patients realize that chronic pain and death and suffering are just going to be there, and it's okay. It's not wrong. It's nothing that we can beat and stop. So Kaiser has meditation classes. Shakti Rose actually teaches one of them. She's from Spirit Rock. And I think when I find patients that I think would benefit from it, I'll sort of push them that direction and say, maybe you should check out this meditation class. It's billed as a stress reduction meditation class, but I think there's a lot of people who could benefit from it. And I think that's really pretty much it. Thank you.
If anyone has any questions or comments to address to either Dean or Todd, now would be the time.
I would like to thank you very much for sharing this. As I said last week, I think one of the special things about the sangha is, but to me the purpose of being part of the sangha is hearing other people's stories and getting to know people in ways we would otherwise probably not get to know them. There's lots of things I could say, but one of the things that was so startling to me about each of your stories was how much I related and how much I had similar experiences. Even though we've never really talked, I think I feel that I know you better. So I appreciate that.
Hello. I don't know which one of these spoke, but I'm disabled wasn't very good. I don't know all about medicine, but I've been practicing with someone, I don't call him my teacher, his student wrote that book. But so he says, when you're just sitting there, you are really, you are, you're imitating. You just don't know. Some explosive wow, it happens and goes on forever. I've had epiphany and all these things. If you have that compassion or something, you have to cultivate it. Even the great teachers speak, cultivate that. What else I wanted to say was a song that has become very important to me. I denied it. I could sit at home, and read the literature, but I was holding back on that. And now I see that it is very important because the energy of you sitting by yourself compared to 20 other people, like Harvard District has transformed to one in there. So that's another age that we need to support. And the garden's beautiful anyway, while we're listening to the lecture. I'm very happy. I shouldn't think, I have so many years, I know so much more. Ego, abandon that. And so I can't sit more than 5 minutes without going into pain. And so does that sometimes people will just sit through it, but I've already had one back surgery, so I have to be able to move around. So I usually come later, meditate at home. But I make it there, at least. Exertion. One of the paramitas, exertion. Exert myself to get there, or there when I feel like I don't want to go. I'd rather stay home in bed, kind of thing. But I've been showing up. I realize how important that is part of the triple treasure.
Actually, I have a question for both you guys. How did your friends adjust to the change in your life when you made these decisions? Because I'm pretty much having this same sort of epiphany. And I'm having some trouble with some friends that don't get it. So I wonder how your friendships adjusted with your change in your direction.
Generally mine fairly positively, because as I got to know myself more, I think I probably became a more bearable person. perhaps at least less unbearable. But I think some people, it's threatening. And, when you start being more aware of who you are and change your values perhaps, and the things that go along with that, like your interests and your activities, then you can have less in common. And if you had a shared history, they can wonder why you now have something different, or why you feel the need to go somewhere else. And that can be perhaps threatening if they're not in that place themselves.
I agree. Generally positive with a few little problems here and there. For me, part of it is being a strict vegetarian. I used to be. We get a flap from certain friends about that. We got to eat together, but generally positive.
I'd be interested to know how you see the GBF fitting into your spiritual path. One of the questions, I've been coming on and off to GBF probably for 8 or 10 years. I don't remember exactly when I started, but since it was over on Gage Street. And it was always an issue then, and it's still an issue now, what are the legitimate paths into Buddhism. We here are sort of ecumenical, and we have many people presenting many viewpoints, and then there are different Dharma centers that present one viewpoint, or a more focused viewpoint, and a more complex and sophisticated way to approach the path. And it sounds like both of you having gone through that transformation. At that point, was it another Dharma tradition or another center that brought you in, and then you came here, or was it this place that provided the pivot rather than something more elaborate or more traditional?
I can speak to that. I mean, for me, it was this and GBF. That's it. It's working fine so far. I love this place. I really appreciate you guys. I really appreciate our sangha, the wisdom and compassion. Comfort that I feel here. So, namaste.
Actually, Todd invited me, Todd and Darren. So I'd been doing some practice on my own, and I've been coming here regularly since January. And I like this because it gives you, it's a sampler. I like all the different teachers. I would prefer more women myself in our group. So for me, in terms of finding a permanent home, I don't even actually mind, I think, if it's gay or not, but I like the idea of being gay because there's enough of the world out there that isn't. And there may be a special energy that we bring as a group. Harry Hay, I remember, talked about us as actually being a completely separate sex, which I'm not sure if I'm quite there, but it's an interesting point that at least we might have a special energy, perhaps something shamanic or something. But I would like to see more women personally, but that's just my personal preference. So whether that happens here or whether I get over that and say I love being here, which I do, or something else. But my path, as I said, is insight meditation, and I would really recommend the 10-day retreats that are possible, which I don't think is particularly one way or the other. If you're more of Zen or you're something else than Tibetan, then it's still going to be fine. But I found that very useful in making meditation less threatening. And what I like about insight meditation, or the path, for me, is the connection with the body, and as a vehicle for noticing the world and bringing the world and interpreting the world as a way of your feelings and your emotions coming in through your body and all your senses. So, sorry, I rambled a bit off the topic there, but
where did you do that 10-day, and who led it?
They have, and you can do them at Spirit Rock. It's a little bit more expensive because they have nice heated floors. But I saw a movie called Doing Vipassana, which was about how they did it in the Indian prisons.
Right.
And so the guy that popularized it from Burma is called S.N. Goenka, and he has Vipassana centers around the world, or he doesn't, he started them. And there's one called the California Vipassana Center up in North Fork, which is in the foothills of the Yosemites. They have a smaller one that they're getting going just somewhere outside Santa Rosa. So I would just go on the internet and see.
Is that what you did? Did you go to the Goenka one?
I did. I went to the one up in North Fork, and I'm actually going again over Christmas for 10 days.
Thank you both for your sharing. Todd, I wanted to ask you what the name of that Hindu restaurant was that you ordered. Log that into my memory. I'm struck with how both of your talks centered around heart. How heart had such a powerful impact for both of you in some very dramatic ways. With the movement to the heart and movement from the heart. What is the heart for you when you talk that way from a Buddhist perspective? When you say heart, what does that mean? And what is a practice that you have that helps to empower that, enrich that, awaken that within you?
For me, I engage in metta bhavana, which is the practice of loving kindness, starting first for myself, then for somebody I love, then for somebody I'm kind of neutral towards, and then for somebody I'm not so thrilled about, and then for the entire world. I tend to do that for about 10 minutes at the end of my meditation in the morning. And I sat and listened, in fact, to Pema Chodron and Jack Cornfield talking together when they were in town a few months ago. And they said because these self-esteem issues are generally so strong in Western culture as opposed to Eastern culture, they would recommend that for an entire year, that you would just focus that on yourself, loving kindness just for yourself. And then when you like yourself more, you're more able to give that out more. I thought that was a really interesting point. They both agreed on that.
I hate to be again, but I took
Harry Hay?
Yeah. And I knew him through an individual that became a priest, left our district. I said, that don't line up with Buddhism very well. But Harry said that, I don't know who he quoted in Darwinism, but there's no behavior or distinction or something that doesn't have a function that survives over the generations. If there isn't a function, it's eliminated from that person or being present the way it supposedly works. So we have it's been thousands of times, since the beginning of time and the gay folk. So that I found very comforting. Nothing survives unless it has a purpose in the life of Darwinism. But there's one other thing. See, my mind's quite slow. But also, I said, what are we here for? Most of us gay folk create beauty in the world. The majority. Right, paint, garden, and so have a purpose or help others, helping someone, right? So that's been very comforting to me. If I don't know, if you had issues around that, but it helped me a lot. So, I need to be here. I'm bringing beauty to the world some way. How can I do it? Just get up in the morning. What you're supposed to do. Have the right intention.
So I want to thank you again for, as other people have, for sharing your experience with us and your honesty in giving some of the background of your lives and your path. And what I want to say is that I think most of us, most of the time, I include myself, are cloaked in masks, and we look around, and it seems like when we're children, all the other families and all the other children and later all the other adults are perfect and healthy and successful and fixed up at the gym. And we have the experience of looking at ourselves to see if we don't succeed in fully ignoring all, not noticing it and realizing that we're not that. And then I guess it's a self-esteem issue that you mentioned. So I think it's useful to hear some of it, and it's helpful having people who aren't formal teachers, because one of the things that happens with formal teachers is most of the time they don't talk about themselves very much, and if they do, the impression one gets is however much difficulty they may have getting there, they are now in a state of perfection. They are perfected, and we are not. And I think it's very helpful to be aware that none of us are. The thing that comes to mind is I'm flying around someplace at home yesterday, I ran across and used in a support group, is a series of pictures about this person. And the one on top is, smiling, happy, perfect. And then you go to the angry face, and then the proud face, and so forth and so on. And they keep on opening up until you get to the one at the bottom, which is just this little baby of sort of what is out here. And so thank you for sharing.
I'd like to thank you too. Todd, I have some chronic issues, and since April 4th I've had a series of faint spells. I've never actually fainted, but they've been undiagnosed. And it's very disconcerting, especially if it occurs while you're driving across the Bay Bridge. And I don't like it. And I actually don't particularly like some of the chronic stuff that I have. And I really need to hear, from others that this is an opening, that this is a spiritual opening. It kind of makes me sick sometimes. This is a spiritual opportunity. Okay, well, you take my knee and I'll give you my spiritual opportunity. But, so that's what I got from your talk, because even at the ripe old age of 61, I don't think that I'm supposed to have these things. And Dean, I was, touched by your talk about grace, because I was a very devout Catholic when I was a boy, and there's a lot I still value about my Catholic upbringing. Those values really don't include what's happening in this little town in Italy. But the idea of grace is something that I haven't been as successful in co-opting in the Buddhism. And just hearing you in some strange level gave me permission to do that. It's like I don't need a tome on it. I can just do it. And so I was very grateful to hear that. And I'm extremely touched by the wisdom of the Sangha, and I know we all have stories that brought us here. And the collective wisdom of the Sangha is very, very moving to me. I feel very blessed that we have teachers come who can give more of a formal Dharma, because I'm blissfully ignorant of that and ferociously lazy about learning it on my own. But I find when I make a heart connection with any of the speakers here, that's probably what I come here for the most. So I'm very grateful for you guys for showing up and offering to talk to us.
I want to thank you both for sharing. It means a lot to know the individuals and to build a Sangha. So I thank you, and I also I find it very valuable to hear people's angst and pains as well as their joys and triumphs and how they feel about the whole mix of things and the changes that people go through. I guess I would make a plug for doing this more often so that, over a year or 2 or 3 years, everybody who wants to could get a chance to share. I think it's valuable for the people who do it, and I think it's fantastic to hear it. I really like coming and meditating here in a group with everybody. I love the fact that there's no rigmarole here. That's very meaningful to me. And to hear, your insights around your insides is significant and important. And I'm delighted. So this is a great opportunity. Thanks.
If anybody would like to share, either by speaking or by maybe sending a few paragraphs to the newsletter, we'd like to encourage that. And maybe the people on the program committee, which is a subcommittee we have for organizing the speakers, if you would identify yourselves as members of the program committee that are here, then anyone who wishes to inquire about a speaking opportunity can go through them. And are we having a newspaper folding today, Jack? Okay. Well, next week, in all likelihood, we'll have the newsletter editor here, and if someone wants to contact Michael Langdon about maybe submitting a few, just as maybe a story that you have, maybe not as extensive or maybe as extensive. From time to time, individuals write for the newsletter, but it doesn't have to be the whole newsletter. It can be just a couple of paragraphs. Because I think we all do benefit from knowing what our stories are in terms of our spiritual life. So thanks again, guys. Are there any announcements?
Since we don't have a newsletter, I thought I'd announce next week we're having Howard King speak. He's a former, he's going to GDF regular. He's going to talk about shamanism healing techniques from a Buddhist perspective. And so that will be interesting. And then on the 18th we have Donald Rothberg, who's a really profound teacher. We haven't had him for a year. He's been really busy. And last year he came in that very same week, sort of the darkest time of the year, and he spoke about welcoming the darkness. And then December 25th and January 1st are on Sundays this year. And so on December 25th we're having Roger Corliss, who's going to give his long delayed talk about Christianity and Buddhism. And he's doing that talk this week. He's doing really well. He started, as many of you know, he's having chemotherapy, and he had the first injection, and he's doing really well, and he's looking forward to coming out. And we're also, on that day, we're going to have a potluck at Bob Siegelkahn's house. And then finally, January 1st, we're having Gene Wilson. We'll start off the new year. So that's our plans for this.
Just a little additional on Roger, whom I just talked to, he said that in preparation for losing his hair from the chemotherapy, he's had it shaved off so that now he looks more successfully like a Buddhist monk.
There's a retreat that's being organized. It sort of came up from the retreat that we had this summer. Some of the people from that retreat wanted to get something else going. So it's going to be happening January 20th, 21st, and 22nd up at Saratoga Hot Springs, which is just a beautiful, beautiful place, and an old Indian hot springs. And the theme is Kalyana Mita, which is spiritual friendship. And it's based, that word arises from the Kalyana Mita Sutta, which says, in which Ananda is chided by the Buddha for saying the following. He says, Lord, surely spiritual friendship is important. It must be half of the practice. And the Buddha says, no, Ananda, you are wrong. Kalyana Mita, spiritual friendship, is the entirety of practice. So, we're going to have, at the closing night, a wonderful gift from someone that I just shared a sweat lodge with up in Willits. He's going to offer a sweat lodge, which is a wonderful time for just people to come together and share in the darkness, in the heat, in the sweat, naked.
Peter?
I am the hostess today. I apologize for being late, but I did bring cookies and cake. Those of you who have been coming for a long time know that I usually bring macaroons, and today I decided not to bring macaroons, so I bought 2 other kinds of cookies. I arrived here and there was a package of Trader Joe macaroons. That seems to be a structural element. So there are several kinds of cookies, including macaroons and pound cake. If you have tea, please rinse your cup and put it back. We do not have maid service, although we're going to host this. And we have a sign-up sheet outside for those of you who are new. If you give us your email, we can send you things by email. If you give us your regular mail, we can send you the newsletter by regular mail. We prefer to send it by email because it's cheaper, but whatever you prefer is okay with us. There's a Dharma bowl outside. There are actually several Dharma bowls because there is a collection plate for this center, which we do not own, but we rent the space from them. And our Dharma bowl is purple. And so we'd like you to put, you're welcome to put money in the other Dharma bowl as well. We are grateful to the center for renting this space to us. But in our Dharma bowl, we suggest that you put a contribution between $5 and $8, less if you can't afford it, more if you feel generous. And I think usually we pick somebody to go around and
Yeah, but someone volunteered today to walk around with the Dharma bowl. We find it helps us remember. I myself probably half the time forget. So if someone walks around, it helps us remember. Okay, thanks.
And I just want a brief announcement. We're doing a meditation study group, like a practice group, the second Sunday every month. So next one coming up, I think, is December 11th. If you'd like to come, it's 45 minutes before this meeting. We just meet in here and go over different types of meditation and do a little practice and discussion. So please join at 9:45.
And there's a single-page sign-up sheet outside for the newcomers. And this puts you on a database, and Gee, it's been so long I looked at it. Is there an indication about whether they want the written newsletter or not on that thing that gets mailed to you, Todd?
Yes.
Okay. So, so there's that. If newcomers, if you want to be on a GBF directory that will probably be out at the end of the spring, next spring, because we're going to let several months go by to accumulate entries. On that sheet out there, newcomers, if you circle your name, that indicates that you want to be in a printed directory. We haven't had a directory in 10 years, so we thought it might be timely to do that. And Todd, who collects the data every week for the newcomers and has also inherited the database, has printed out the database, and I'll put this out there every week. And hosts and facilitators, this is new, so let's make sure it gets out every week. I'll put it in the cupboard, so hosts and facilitators, you could help make sure that this gets out every week. And if someone will help announce every week for the next couple of months, maybe till April, to remind people to do this, then we can get this directory out.
Okay. Let me just reemphasize that to be in the directory, the default is you are not in the directory unless you circle your name, so that protects everyone's privacy. So if you don't want to be in the directory, don't do anything.
Thank you.
Just to add, the retreat has got about 12 or 13 people who are firm to go, and probably 25 is about the limit we could expect. So I'm going to be announcing it on our site and also on Billy Club site and Caitlin's Spiritual Sangha and True Sangha. So if you want to go and you know, please tell me real soon so we can make sure you're in there. Give me your cards. January 20, 21, 22. And it's such a deal. It's such a deal. $58 to cover this one.
Yeah. Okay, well, get into a circle maybe give our speakers and everybody else, send them some metta, everybody else who's here, everyone else who's brought themselves here to our beloved Sangha and shared their presence with us. Let's express our gratitude for that on this weekend where we're asked to remember what we're grateful for.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.